The sky above Dravik Prime looked like blood. The clouds were red and thick with ash. Fires burned across the dead cities below. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the entrance of the refugee camp and looked around. Everywhere she looked, she saw suffering. The Dravikians were dying. These dragon-like beings once ruled this beautiful world. They had shining scales that changed colors in the light. They built towers that touched the sky. They wrote poetry and created art. But now their world was a graveyard. Two powerful empires decided to fight their war here. The Zephron Collective wanted the minerals under the ground. The Krill Dominion wanted to control the space around the planet. The Dravikians just wanted to live in peace. Nobody asked them what they wanted. Nobody cared. The bombing started 6 months ago. First, the Zephron ships came and destroyed the spaceports. Then the Krill landed their armies and burned the farms. Supply trucks stopped coming. Food ran out. Medicine disappeared. Clean water became rare. Millions of Dravikians died in the first month. Millions more were dying now. Sarah walked through the camp with her team. Human aid workers carried boxes of food and medical supplies. Thousands of Dravikians sat on the ground, too weak to stand. Their scales were dull and cracked. Their eyes were empty. Many were already dead, but nobody had the strength to move the bodies. A young Dravikian female approached them. She was thin, so thin that Sarah could see her bones through her scales. She carried something in her arms. As she got closer, Sarah saw it was a child, a small dragon boy with pale white scales. In Dravikians, white scales meant starvation. It meant death was close. The female stopped in front of Sarah. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. She tried again. This time the words came out. "Take my pale dragon brother, sir," she said. Her voice shook. Tears ran down her scaled face. "We haven't eaten in 3 days." Sarah didn't understand at first. The female pushed the small boy forward. The child's eyes were closed. He was barely breathing. "Please," the female said again. "Take him, eat him. At least one of us can live." The words hit Sarah like a punch. The girl thought humans would eat her brother. She was offering her brother as food so she could survive. This was what the war had done to these people. It had taken everything from them, even their hope. All around them, other Dravikians watched. They understood what the girl was doing. Nobody tried to stop her. This was normal now. This was survival. Sarah felt sick. She looked at her team. They all had tears in their eyes. She looked back at the girl named Sithara. The boy was named Corvin. Sarah knelt down. She took off her backpack. She pulled out emergency food packets, high-calorie bars, protein drinks, water bottles. She opened a bar and held it out to Sithara. "Eat," Sarah said softly. "Both of you." Sithara stared at the food. She didn't take it. She didn't understand. Sarah moved closer and put the bar in Sithara's hand. Then she opened a protein drink and held it to little Corvin's mouth. The boy's eyes opened slightly. He drank. Sithara finally understood. The humans weren't taking her brother to eat him. They were giving food. They were helping. Her hand shook as she bit into the food bar. She started to cry harder. Around them, the camp went silent. Thousands of Dravikians watched. In the whole galaxy, no species gave food to outsiders during hard times. Everyone knew the rule. You took care of your own first. If food was short, strangers died. That was how the universe worked. But humans were different. Sarah's team moved through the camp. They opened their supplies. They started handing out food to everyone. The Dravikians didn't move at first. They thought it was a trick. But as more humans arrived with more supplies, they began to understand. Sarah pulled out her radio. She called the human fleet in orbit. Her voice was hard. Her words were clear. "This is Commander Chen. We need everything. Send all the food. Send all the medicine. Send every supply ship we have." The officer on the other end hesitated. "Commander, that will empty our reserves. We won't have supplies for our own people if something happens." "I know," Sarah said. She looked at Sithara holding her brother. She looked at the thousands of dying people around her. "Do it anyway. This ends now." In orbit, human ships started changing course. Cargo vessels full of supplies turned toward the planet. Military ships prepared to protect them. On Earth, news of the crisis spread. Humans began gathering more food, more medicine, more help. The Zephron watched this with their crystal eyes. They calculated the numbers. Humans were giving away resources they would need. This made no sense. This was inefficient. This was illogical. The Krill watched with their hive mind. They tried to understand. Worker insects served the queen. Soldiers defended the nest. But helping strangers? Helping other species? The concept did not exist in their minds. As the sun set on Dravik Prime, Sarah sat with Cythera. The girl and her brother were eating slowly. Too much food too fast would make them sick. Sarah taught her how to eat safely after starvation. Why? Cythera asked. Why do you help us? We have nothing to give you, Sarah smiled sadly. Because it's the right thing to do. Cythera didn't understand those words. Not yet, but she would. They all would. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity really meant, and nothing would ever be the same again. News traveled fast in space. Within hours, every empire knew what happened on Dravik Prime. The humans had arrived and started giving away their supplies. They were feeding the Dravikians. The whole galaxy was watching. In the crystal halls of the Zephron Collective, the leaders gathered. The Zephron were beings made of living crystal. They thought in numbers and calculations. Everything had to be efficient. Everything had to make logical sense. Ambassador Quartz 7 studied the reports. The humans were using all their food reserves. They were sending ships from every colony. They were spending resources that would take years to replace. And for what? For a species that could give them nothing in return. This is madness, Quartz 7 said to the council. I have run the calculations 1,000 times. There is no logical reason for this behavior. The humans gain nothing. They lose everything. This makes no sense. Across space, in the dark hive ships of the Krill Dominion, the Empress was troubled. The Krill were insect-like creatures connected by one shared mind. What one Krill knew, all Krill knew. What the Empress thought, all Krill thought. But now the Empress was confused. This had never happened before. Confusion meant the hive mind had no answer. Confusion was dangerous. The Empress tried to understand. Workers served the colony. Soldiers protected the nest. Resources went to the queen. This was the way of all insect species. This was natural law. But humans broke this law. They gave resources to strangers. They helped creatures from other worlds. The hive mind could not process this information. It did not fit any known pattern. On Dravik Prime, the situation was changing fast. More human ships arrived every hour. They brought containers full of food, medicine, and water. They brought engineers to fix the power stations. They brought doctors to treat the sick. Cythera watched it all happen. Her brother Corvin was getting stronger. His pale scales were starting to show color again. The protein drinks and vitamin supplements were saving his life. Around the camp, thousands of other Dravikians were also recovering. One evening, Cythera sat with Commander Chen. The commander was eating a simple meal of rice and beans. Cythera noticed that the commander ate the same food as the refugees. The humans were not keeping better food for themselves. Tell me about your people, Commander Chen said. Before the war. What was Dravik Prime like? Cythera closed her eyes. She remembered. We were artists. We were dreamers. Our cities had gardens on every building. We wrote songs about the stars. We carved statues from the mountains. We believed that beauty was the highest purpose of life. She opened her eyes. They were wet with tears. Then the Zephron came. They said our world had valuable minerals. They started mining operations. We said no. We said this was our home. They did not care. Then the Krill arrived. They wanted to build military bases here. We said no to them too. So both empires decided to take what they wanted by force. Commander Chen listened. She had heard stories like this before. Big empires crushing small worlds. The strong taking from the weak. It happened all the time in space. But that did not make it right. Your people will survive this, Chen said. I promise you. Cythera wanted to believe her. But she had learned not to hope. Hope hurt too much when it died. Back on Earth, something remarkable was happening. Humans were organizing the largest aid effort in history. Every colony was sending supplies. Farmers donated their crops. Factories switched to making medicine and food packets. Cargo ships volunteered to carry supplies for free. The human government tried to slow things down. Officials worried about running out of resources. Economists warned about economic collapse. Military leaders warned that they would have no reserves if war came. But the people did not listen. Humans around the galaxy watched the news from Dravik Prime. They saw the starving Dravikians. They saw the children with pale scales. They saw people dying. And they couldn't just watch. They had to help. The Zephron and Krill watched this with growing alarm. The humans were becoming a problem. A big problem. Both empires had invested heavily in taking Dravik Prime. They had spent years preparing. They had lost soldiers and ships. They were not going to give up now because some emotional species felt sad. The Zephyrin sent the first message. It appeared on every human communication channel. The message was simple and clear. This is the Zephyrin Collective. Dravik Prime is a designated resource acquisition zone. Your presence here is not authorized. You have 48 hours to withdraw all personnel and vessels. If you do not comply, you will be classified as hostile combatants. 1 hour later, the Krill sent their own message. It was similar but more direct. Leave now or die. Commander Chen received both messages. She called an emergency meeting with her officers. They gathered in a tent at the edge of the refugee camp. Everyone knew what this meant. If they stayed, there would be war. The Zephyrin and Krill had millions of soldiers, thousands of warships. The humans had a small fleet and were outnumbered 20-1. We should leave, one officer said. We can't win this fight. If we stay, we all die. And the Dravikians? Chen asked. What happens to them? Nobody answered. They all knew. Without human protection and supplies, the Dravikians would starve. The war would continue. The entire species would die. Commander Chen stood up. She walked to the tent entrance and looked out. She could see Cythera playing with her brother. The little boy was laughing. It was probably the first time he had laughed in months. Around them, thousands of Dravikians were alive because of human help. They were weak, but they were alive. Chen made her decision. She turned back to her officers. Her voice was steady and strong. Send a message to Earth, tell them we're staying. Tell them to send more ships, more supplies, more everything. Commander, an officer protested. That is suicide. We cannot fight them all. Chen looked at him. Her eyes were hard. Then we die. But we die doing the right thing. That has to count for something. The message went out. Earth's response came back within hours. It was short. Just 3 words, help is coming. Human fleets across the galaxy changed course. They all headed for Dravik Prime. Battle cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and thousands of smaller ships. The entire human military was moving. Not to attack, not to conquer, but to protect. The 48-hour deadline approached. The Zephyrin and Krill waited for the humans to leave. They were certain the humans would leave. Any logical species would leave. Fighting was too costly. The risk was too high. But when the deadline passed, the humans were still there. In fact, more humans had arrived. Human ships now filled the orbit around Dravik Prime. They formed a protective shell around the planet. The Zephyrin recalculated their models. The Krill consulted the hive mind. Both came to the same conclusion. The humans were not leaving. War was coming, and neither empire understood why humans would choose to die for strangers. The deadline had passed. The humans had not left. Now both empires had to make a choice. Would they actually attack? Would they start a war with humanity over one small planet? Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the human flagship. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had fought in 3 wars. He knew what was coming. Around him, junior officers watched their screens with nervous faces. Admiral, we have movement from the Zephyrin fleet, an officer reported. They are forming attack formations, and the Krill? Okonkwo asked. The same, sir. They are preparing to engage. Okonkwo took a deep breath. He opened a channel to every ship in the human fleet. His voice was calm and clear. All ships, this is Admiral Okonkwo. In a few minutes we may be asked to fight. Some of you are afraid. That is normal. Some of you wonder why we are here. Let me tell you, he paused. Every human in the fleet was listening now. So were the Zephyrin and the Krill. The whole galaxy was watching. Down on that planet are people who are dying. They did nothing wrong. They just wanted to live in peace. 2 empires decided to fight a war on their home. Nobody asked the Dravikians what they wanted. Nobody cared if they lived or died. His voice grew stronger. But we care. We came here because a young girl was so desperate that she offered her brother his food. She thought that was the only way one of them could survive. That is what this war has done to these people. It has destroyed their hope. It has stolen their future. So we draw the line here. We say no more. No species under our protection will starve while we have breath. No people will die alone while we can stand with them. This is what it means to be human. He broadcast on all frequencies so everyone could hear. To the Zephyrin Collective and the Krill Dominion, hear this. We will not leave. We will not abandon these people. If you attack, we will defend them. That is our choice. Now make yours. On Dravik Prime, Cythera heard the broadcast. She sat with other Dravikians around a radio. They all listened to the human admiral's words. Many started crying. They had never heard anyone speak like that about them. They were not used to anyone caring. Commander Chen found Cythera and sat beside her. The Dravikian girl looked up with wet eyes. You really mean it, Cythera whispered. You would die for us, Chen nodded. Yes, because it is right. Because you matter. Because every life has value. Cythera did not understand these concepts fully. Her people had been artists and dreamers, but this was different. This was something deeper. Humans believed these ideas were worth dying for. In orbit, the Zephyron fleet moved first. Crystal ships began powering up their weapons. Their leader, Ambassador Court 7, sent one final message. Humans, this is your last chance. Leave now or be destroyed. We have calculated your strength. You cannot win. This is simple mathematics. Admiral Okonkwo smiled sadly. He sent back a simple reply. Some things are more important than mathematics. The Zephyron did not understand. But they did not need to understand. They just needed to eliminate the problem. The first Zephyron ship fired. A beam of energy shot toward a human cargo vessel. The unarmed ship was carrying grain for the refugees. The cargo ship exploded. 2,000 human crew members died instantly. Their bodies floated in space alongside containers of grain that scattered like seeds. The human fleet went silent. Every person watched the debris field. They had all known people on that ship. Friends, family, good people who had volunteered to help strangers. Admiral Okonkwo closed his eyes. He thought of the grain floating in space, food that would never reach hungry people. He thought of the crew who had died trying to do the right thing. Then he opened his eyes. They were hard as steel. A message came from Earth. It contained authorization codes. Codes that unlocked the full capability of the human military. The message was short and clear, weapons free. Make them remember this. Okonkwo transmitted to his fleet. His voice was cold. All ships engage at will. Show no mercy to their military vessels. Protect the supply ships. Protect the planet. Fight for every Dravikian life. This is what we came here to do. The human fleet moved. They moved with a speed and precision that shocked both empires. The humans had been holding back. They had been hoping to avoid this. But now that fighting had started, they showed what they could really do. Human fighters launched from carriers. They were small and fast. They swarmed around the big Zephyron ships like angry bees. Missiles streaked through space. The crystal ships began exploding one by one. The Zephyron could not believe it. Their calculations had been wrong. The Krill sent their bioships forward. These were living vessels grown, not built. They were strong and hard to kill. But humans had studied them. Human weapons released chemicals that confused the bioship's sensors. The Krill vessels flew into each other, unable to tell friend from enemy. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the space around Dravik Prime was full of debris. Hundreds of Zephyron and Krill ships were destroyed. The human fleet had also taken losses. 23 ships were gone. 5,000 humans were dead, but the supply lines held. The cargo ships kept coming. The aid kept flowing to the planet. Not one Zephyron or Krill ship had gotten through to stop them. On their command ships, the Zephyron and Krill leaders were stunned. The humans were outnumbered, but they fought with a skill and fury that was terrifying. More than that, they never stopped protecting the supply ships. Even when dying, human warships used their last moments to shield the unarmed cargo vessels. Ambassador Court 7 ran new calculations. The numbers were clear. The Zephyron could win eventually. They had more ships, but the cost would be enormous. And the humans would never stop fighting. They would die to the last person protecting those refugees. The Krill Empress consulted the hive mind. The response was confusion mixed with something new. Fear. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose. No, that was wrong. They fought like they had everything to lose. They fought like those Dravikians were their own children. This concept was alien to both empires, caring about strangers enough to die for them. It made no evolutionary sense. It was not efficient, but it was effective. On the planet below, the Dravikians watched the battle in the sky. They saw the explosions. They knew humans were dying up there, dying to protect them. Cythera held her brother and cried. Commander Chen stood beside her, watching the sky with sad eyes. Why do you do this? Cythera asked again. We cannot repay you. We have nothing. Chen looked down at her. You have your lives. You have your culture. You have dreams and hopes and futures. That is everything. That is worth fighting for. In orbit, Admiral Okonkwo received casualty reports. So many dead, so many ships destroyed. But he also received another report. The Zephron and Krill fleets were pulling back. Not retreating fully, but giving space. They were reconsidering their approach. Okonkwo knew this was not victory. This was just the beginning. The empires would come back with more ships. They would not give up their claims. But for now, for today, the Dravikians were safe. The supply ships were getting through. And that was enough. He opened a channel to all human ships. Well done, all of you. We held the line. People died today for something greater than themselves. Honor them by continuing the mission. Keep those supplies moving. Keep those people fed. That is what they died for. Across the galaxy, other species watched the battle with wonder and fear. The humans had proven something terrible and beautiful. They would fight wars not for conquest or resources, but for strangers. They would die not for profit or power, but for principles. The galaxy was learning what humanity meant, and it would never be the same. The weeks that followed the first battle were tense. The Zephron and Krill did not attack again, but they did not leave either. Their fleet stayed at the edge of the system, watching and waiting. They were planning their next move. On Dravik Prime, life was slowly improving. The Dravikians were getting stronger. Human engineers had repaired the water treatment plants. Human doctors had set up hospitals. Human teachers were helping Dravikian children start school again. It was not perfect, but it was hope. Cythera had become a translator and helper for the humans. Her brother Corvin was healthy now. His scales had turned from pale white to bright silver. He played with other Dravikian children in the camps. Sometimes Cythera watched him and cried happy tears. She had been so sure he would die. One day, Commander Chen asked Cythera to help at the medical tent. A group of wounded soldiers had been brought in. Cythera expected them to be humans. She was shocked to see they were Zephron and Krill. What are they doing here? Cythera asked. They were injured in the battle, Chen explained. We rescued them from their damaged ships. Cythera stared. But they are your enemies. They tried to kill you. Chen nodded. Yes, but now they are wounded and need help. So we helped them. Cythera watched as human doctors treated the wounded aliens with the same care they gave to humans. A Zephron warrior with a cracked crystal arm received surgery. A Krill soldier with damaged wings got medicine and bandages. The humans worked to save them all. I do not understand, Cythera said. In war, you kill your enemies. That is how war works, a human medic nearby overheard. He was an older man with kind eyes. He stopped his work and looked at Cythera. We fight when we must, the medic said. But we never forget that our enemies are also people. They have families. They have hopes. Many of them did not choose this war. They were just following orders. When the fighting stops, even for a moment, we remember their humanity, or in this case, their personhood. He returned to bandaging a Krill soldier. If we become like those who would let innocents starve, then what were we fighting for? The wounded Zephron and Krill soldiers were confused too. They watched the humans work to save their lives. This made no sense. In their militaries, wounded enemies were left to die or killed quickly. Resources were not wasted on prisoners. But humans were different. One Krill soldier was named Scout 449. He was young for his species. He had been drafted into the war and sent to fight. He had never questioned orders. The hive mind told him what to do and he did it. But now the hive mind was confused. It had no instructions for this situation. Scout 449 watched a human nurse change his bandages. She was gentle and careful. She smiled at him even though he was from the species that had killed thousands of her people. Why? He asked in broken English. The hive mind had taught him some human language for intelligence gathering. The nurse looked at him. Why what? Why save me? Why not let me die? She sat down beside his bed. Because you are hurt and I am a nurse. It is that simple. I do not care which side you fight for. I care that you are in pain and I can help. Scout 449 felt something strange. It was like a crack in the hive mind connection. For the first time in his life, he had a thought that was just his own. The humans had shown him something the hive never taught. Individual choice. Personal morality. Far away in deep space, the Krill Empress felt that crack too. Scout 449 was part of her mind. What he experienced, she experienced. And it confused her greatly. She called together her advisors, but they were just extensions of her own thoughts. She needed something else. She needed to understand. She did something unprecedented. She began accessing human historical databases. The Krill had captured some human ships over the years. They had copied their computers. The Empress started reading. She read about human wars. She read about human heroes. She read about humans who had died saving strangers. She read about soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends. She read about doctors who treated plague victims knowing they would get sick too. She read about firefighters who ran into burning buildings. She read about ordinary people who hid refugees in their homes during genocides, risking their own lives. The Empress tried to understand. In the hive, everything served the queen. Resources went to reproduction and expansion. Individual lives meant nothing. But humans were different. Each individual human had value. Each one made choices. Many chose to sacrifice themselves for others. This was not efficient. This was not logical. But the results were undeniable. Human civilization had survived wars, plagues, and disasters that should have destroyed them. They survived because they helped each other. They survived because they refused to leave anyone behind. The Empress made a decision. She sent a message to Admiral Okonkwo. It was short and simple. We do not understand you. This frightens us. We withdraw to consider. The Krill fleet began to leave. Thousands of bioships turned away from Dravik Prime and jumped to hyperspace. They were not defeated. They were confused. And for the Krill, that was more frightening than any weapon. The Zephyron watched the Krill leave with their crystal eyes. Ambassador Court 7 ran more calculations. The Zephyron could still win if they attacked now. The humans were alone. But the cost would be high. Very high. More importantly, Court 7 had been studying the humans too. He had watched them fight. He had watched them heal their enemies. He had seen them sacrifice resources for principles. There was a pattern here. A pattern his calculations could not explain. Humans operated on variables the Zephyron did not measure. Honor, compassion, love. These were not resources you could mine or trade. They could not be calculated, but they were powerful. They made humans willing to die for strangers. That kind of motivation was worth more than any weapon. Court 7 sent his own message. It went to the Zephyron leadership and to the human fleet. We have calculated a new variable in our models. The variable is difficult to define, but we will attempt. Humans possess what we will call moral weight. This is a force multiplier we did not account for. We request negotiations, he paused, then added. Also, our wounded soldiers report that humans fed them while treating their injuries. We are hungry. Will you feed us while we talk? On the human flagship, Admiral Okonkwo read the message and smiled. It was a tired smile. So many had died. So much was still uncertain. But this was progress. Send them coordinates for a meeting, he ordered. And yes, tell them we will provide food. We have plenty of grain, after all. He thought of the cargo ship that had been destroyed, the 2,000 crew members who had died, the grain floating in space. They had died protecting food meant for the hungry. It seemed right that their sacrifice would now feed even their enemies. On Dravik Prime, Cythera watched the Krill and Zephyron fleets withdraw. She stood with Commander Chen and Little Corvin. Is it over? She asked. Chen shook her head. Not over. But it is changing. The galaxy is learning something new. It is learning that there is another way. A better way. Cythera looked down at her brother. He was playing with a toy a human soldier had made for him. A simple wooden spaceship. Corvin was laughing and making flying sounds. He was alive because humans had cared. Cythera herself was alive for the same reason. What is this better way called? Cythera asked. Commander Chen smiled. We call it humanity, and we are going to teach it to everyone. The negotiations took place on a neutral station. It was an old trading post that belonged to no empire. Ambassador Court 7 arrived first with his delegation. They were nervous. The Zephyron had never negotiated from a position of uncertainty before. Usually they calculated everything and knew the outcome before talks began. Admiral Okonkwo arrived with a small team. He brought Commander Chen. He also brought Cythera. The Dravikian girl was terrified, but Chen held her hand. Cythera needed to be here. She represented what this was all about. True to their word, humans had set up a meal. Tables were filled with food. Bread, fruits, vegetables, and proteins from a dozen worlds. It was a feast. The Zephyrin delegation stared. They had expected military rations. This was hospitality. Please eat, Okonkwo said. He gestured to the food. We can talk while we share a meal. The Zephyrin sat down cautiously. They began to eat. The food was good. As they ate, they relaxed slightly. There was something about sharing food that changed the mood. It made enemies into guests. Quartz 7 spoke first. We have been studying your species. We have tried to understand your actions. Our calculations cannot explain you. Okonkwo smiled. That is because you are trying to calculate morality. It does not work that way. Explain, Quartz 7 said. What is this morality? How does it provide strategic advantage? Commander Chen leaned forward. It does not provide strategic advantage. Not directly. But it provides something more important. It provides purpose. It provides meaning. Humans need to believe we are doing the right thing. Without that belief, we fall apart. Cythera spoke up. Her voice was quiet but firm. They saved us when they had no reason to. They fed my brother when I thought he would die. They fought for us even though we could give them nothing. That is morality. Quartz 7 looked at the Dravikian girl. His crystalline face was hard to read, but his posture changed. He understood something now. You are the one who offered her brother. I read the reports, Cythera nodded. Yes, I thought humans would eat him so I could live. I was wrong. They fed us both. They fed everyone. The Zephyrin ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised everyone. I believe I am beginning to understand. You humans have discovered something we missed. Efficiency without compassion leads to stagnation. Species that only calculate become brittle. They cannot adapt to variables they do not measure. He looked at his delegation. We Zephyrin have not had a new idea in 10,000 years. We calculate what has worked before and repeat it. But humans innovate constantly. Your chaos creates new solutions. Your compassion creates loyalty that cannot be calculated. While the Zephyrin were talking, something else was happening far away. The Krill Empress had been thinking. Thinking alone. This was strange for a hive mind. Usually all thoughts were shared. But the Empress had been keeping some thoughts to herself. She had read so much about humans. She had learned about their history. She had seen how individual humans made choices. Some chose good. Some chose evil. But they all chose. This concept of individual choice was fascinating and terrifying. The Empress made a radical decision. She sent a single Krill to the negotiation station. Not a general. Not a diplomat. She sent Scout 449, the young soldier who had been wounded and healed by humans. Scout 449 arrived at the station and everyone was surprised. He walked into the room where negotiations were happening. He looked different. Other Krill moved with mechanical precision. Scout 449 hesitated. He looked around with his own eyes, not just the hive mind's vision. I am Scout 449, he said in broken English. The Empress sends me. She says I should speak for myself. This is new for us. Okonkwo stood and offered Scout 449 a chair. Welcome. Please sit. Have you eaten? Scout 449 sat down awkwardly. Humans always ask that. Always offer food. The hive mind does not understand. Food is life, Commander Chen said. When we share food, we share life. It is how we show we care. Scout 449 took some bread and ate slowly. The Empress is changing. The hive mind is changing. We felt what you did. When you healed our wounded. When you gave food to your enemies. This created something in the hive, a crack. A space where new thoughts can grow. He looked at each person at the table. The Empress wants to know. Can the Krill learn this humanity? Can we become individuals while staying connected? Can we care about others outside the hive? Okonkwo considered the question carefully. I do not know. But I know that asking the question is the first step. The fact that you are here speaking for yourself shows that change is already happening. Cythera looked at Scout 449 with curiosity. You were one of the soldiers who attacked my world. You helped destroy my cities. You killed my people. Scout 449 lowered his head. Yes, I am sorry. I did not choose. The hive mind commanded and I obeyed. But now I feel something, regret, shame. These are my own feelings. The Empress says I must learn to live with them. Cythera was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that shocked everyone. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because that is what humans taught me. Forgiveness is how we move forward. Scout 449 stared at her. The concept of forgiveness was new to him. In the hive, there was no forgiveness. There was only success or failure. Orders followed or not followed. But this Dravikian girl was offering him something precious, a second chance. The negotiations continued for hours. Plans were made. The Zephron agreed to withdraw their mining operations from Dravik Prime. The Krill agreed to remove their military bases. In return, humans would help both species learn new ways of thinking. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs were established. But the most important agreement was simple. It was written in plain language that any species could understand. It said that no species would ever again be allowed to starve while others watched. Food aid would become a galactic right. The strong would help the weak, not exploit them. Quartz 7 signed the document with his crystalline hand. We Zephron have learned that efficiency has a cost. That cost is our souls. We have been calculating machines for so long that we forgot how to feel. Perhaps it is time we remembered. Scout 449 signed next. His hand shook. This was the first time a Krill had made a decision that was not directly commanded by the Empress. The hive mind is afraid, but it is also curious. We will try to learn. We will try to become more than we were. Admiral Okonkwo signed last. He looked at the gathered representatives. This is just the beginning. We have a long way to go. Old habits are hard to break. Old fears are hard to overcome. But today we took the first step. Today the galaxy chose to be better. As the meeting ended, Sethera stood by a window looking out at the stars. Commander Chen joined her. "What are you thinking about?" Chen asked. Sethera smiled. It was the first real smile Chen had seen from her. "I am thinking about my brother. About my people. About the future. For the first time since the war began, I have hope." Chen put her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Hope is powerful. It is what kept us fighting. It is what brought us here. Never lose that hope." Sethara looked at Chen with grateful eyes. "I will not. And I will teach it to others. We Dravikans were artists and dreamers. We forgot how to dream during the war. But humans reminded us. You showed us that even in the darkest times there can be light." The station was quiet as everyone prepared to leave. But the galaxy outside was changing. Word of the agreement was spreading. Other species were watching and learning. The idea that compassion could be stronger than calculation was revolutionary. The idea that morality mattered was transforming civilizations. The Krill Empress sat in her chamber and felt the hive mind evolving. Millions of Krill were beginning to have individual thoughts. It was chaos. It was frightening. But it was also beautiful. For the first time, the Krill could imagine a future different from their past. The galaxy was learning, and humanity had been the teacher. Not through conquest, not through force, but through simple acts of kindness, through feeding the hungry, through healing the wounded, through choosing to do what was right even when it was hard. This was the power of humanity, and it would change everything. 5 years had passed since the day Sethera offered her brother to the humans. Dravik Prime looked different now. The bombed cities had been rebuilt. Gardens grew on every building again, just like before the war. The sky was still red, but it was a natural red from the sunset, not smoke and ash. Sithera stood on a hillside overlooking the capital city. She was no longer the starving, desperate girl who had begged humans to eat her brother. She was a diplomat now. She worked with the human embassy, teaching aliens about Dravikian culture and learning about other worlds. Beside her stood Corvin. He was a young adult now with beautiful silver scales that shone in the sunlight. He had become an agricultural scientist. He worked with human experts to develop new farming techniques. His goal was to make sure no Dravikian would ever starve again. "Do you remember that day?" Corvin asked. "The day Commander Chen gave us food?" Sethera nodded. "Every day. I remember being so sure you would die. I remember thinking that offering you as food was the only way. I was wrong about so many things. You were trying to save me," Corvin said. "That was love. Humans taught us that love does not require sacrifice like that. Real love finds another way." They walked down the hill toward the ceremony site. Today was a special day. A memorial was being unveiled. It would honor everyone who had died during the war and everyone who had helped save Dravik Prime. At the ceremony site, thousands had gathered. Dravikians, humans, Zephron, even some Krill. The mixing of species would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Now it was normal. The galaxy had changed. Commander Chen was there, now promoted to Ambassador Chen. She had chosen to stay on Dravik Prime and help with the rebuilding. She had become like family to Cythera and Corvin. Admiral Okonkwo was there too. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. He walked with a cane after being injured in the later battles, but he stood straight and proud. Scout 449 attended as well. He was no longer just Scout 449. The Krill had learned to give themselves individual names. He had chosen the name Marcus after a human soldier who had been kind to him. Marcus now led the Krill reform movement. He taught other Krill how to think for themselves while staying connected to the hive. Ambassador Quartz 7 was also present. The Zephron Collective had undergone massive changes. They still calculated and planned, but they now included compassion in their equations. They called it the humanity variable. It could not be measured in numbers, but its effects were undeniable. The ceremony began. A Dravikian elder spoke first. She talked about the dark times, the starvation, the death, the hopelessness. Then she talked about the day humans arrived. The day everything changed. Admiral Okonkwo spoke next. His voice was strong despite his age. We lost many people in this conflict. Humans, Dravikians, even Zephron and Krill, who later became our friends. Each death was a tragedy. Each life mattered. We honor them today by continuing their work, by building a galaxy where no one starves while others watch, where strength is used to protect, not exploit. Then Cythera was asked to speak. She walked to the platform nervously. She had prepared a speech, but when she looked at the crowd, the words disappeared. Instead, she spoke from her heart. 5 years ago, I tried to give my brother to humans as food, she began. The crowd was silent. I was so desperate that I thought this was the only way. I thought all species in the galaxy were the same. They would take what they could get and leave nothing behind. She looked at Ambassador Chen. But humans showed me I was wrong. They did not take my brother. They fed us both. They fed everyone. They risked their lives for strangers. They taught us that another way was possible. She turned to Quartz 7 and Marcus. The Zephron and Krill were our enemies. They destroyed our world, but humans showed us how to forgive. They showed us that enemies can become friends. They proved that change is always possible. Her voice grew stronger. Today we remember those who died, but we also celebrate those who lived. We celebrate the humans who came when no one else would. We celebrate the Zephron who learned to feel. We celebrate the Krill who learned to choose. And we celebrate the Dravikians who learned to hope again. She pointed to the memorial. This monument has words in every language. Dravikian, human, Zephron, and Krill. It has one simple message that everyone needs to remember. The cloth covering the memorial was pulled away. The monument was a tall pillar made of stone from each homeworld. Mixed together, united. On it was carved a simple message. Here stands proof that survival alone is not living. We were offered as food. They offered us hope. This is the day we learned what humanity truly means. And it changed everything. The crowd stood in silence for a moment. Then someone started clapping. It was Marcus. Other Krill joined him. Then the Zephron. Then everyone. The applause went on for minutes. After the ceremony, people gathered to talk and share food. It was a feast like the one at the first negotiations. Humans always brought food to important events. Other species had learned to do the same. Sharing meals had become a symbol of peace across the galaxy. Cythera found Ambassador Chen sitting under a tree. The human woman looked tired but happy. Thank you, Cythera said simply. For everything, Chen smiled. You do not need to thank me. What we did was right. That is reason enough. But so many humans died, Cythera said. The crew of that first cargo ship. The soldiers who fought. All those lives. Was it worth it? Chen looked at the crowd. Dravikians laughing. Krill learning to smile. Zephron sharing stories. Different species living together in peace. Yes, she said firmly. They died for something greater than themselves. They died proving that compassion is not weakness. That mercy is not foolishness. They died teaching the galaxy a better way. That is worth everything. Cythera nodded. She understood now. 5 years ago, she had been willing to sacrifice her brother because she saw no other choice. But humans had shown her that there was always another choice. There was always hope. Around the galaxy, the changes continued to spread. The Theldari, a species of bird-like traders, started copying human aid programs. When they found struggling colonies, they sent help instead of exploiting them. The Morvek, an aquatic species of philosophers, began teaching ethics based on human principles. Wars still happened. The galaxy was not perfect. Old conflicts did not disappear overnight. But something fundamental had shifted. There were now rules about war, rules about treating prisoners, rules about protecting civilians. Species that broke these rules faced consequences from everyone else. The phrase "to show humanity" became common across the galaxy. It meant to show compassion, to help without expecting reward, to do the right thing even when it was hard. Species that had never met humans used this phrase. They taught their children what humanity meant. The Zephyrin Collective had rewritten their entire philosophy. Their new prime directive was simple. Efficiency without compassion is extinction by another name. They still calculated everything, but now their calculations included the value of kindness, the weight of mercy, and the power of hope. The Krill had evolved into something new. The hive mind still existed, but it was different now. Individual Krill could choose to connect or disconnect. They could have their own thoughts while also sharing with the collective. It was the best of both worlds. Unity without slavery. The Krill Empress had given herself a name too. She chose harmony. She led her people through the changes with wisdom and patience. She often thought about the day she read human history. The day she learned that sacrifice and compassion could coexist. That day had saved her species from eternal stagnation. As the sun set on Dravik Prime, Corvin planted a tree next to the memorial. It was an oak tree from Earth, a gift from humanity. The tree would grow strong and tall. Its roots would dig deep into Dravikian soil, mixing Earth and Dravik together. Beside the tree, he placed a small plaque. On it was written a personal message from the Dravikian people to humanity. You taught us that we were worth saving. You showed us that strangers can be family. You proved that love is stronger than fear. You are humanity, and you changed everything. We will never forget. The tree would become a symbol. Other species started planting earth trees on their worlds. Gardens of remembrance grew across the galaxy. Each tree represented a commitment, a promise to be better, to show humanity in all they did. Years later, historians would write about this time. They would call it the Great Awakening, the moment when the galaxy learned that there was more to life than survival. That civilization required not just technology and resources, but compassion and morality. Humans did not become rulers of the galaxy. They did not want that. They remained one species among many, but they had changed the fundamental equation. They had proven that kindness was not weakness, that helping others made everyone stronger, that doing the right thing mattered most. The Dravikians returned to their art and poetry. But their new works were different. They wrote about hope and redemption. They painted scenes of different species working together. They composed songs about the humans who came when no one else would. One popular Dravikian song told the story of Cythera and Corvin, the girl who offered her brother, the humans who fed them both, the war that ended not with conquest but with compassion. Children across the galaxy learned this song. They sang it in different languages,